is doing the YouTube part of streaming, which takes a few seconds.
No worries.
And I will wait for your word, Charles. I do kind of wish that you had beautiful green eyes so we could get that, like, that sky blue, sea green, and dark chocolate eye thing going, all three of us, just like the holy triumvirate of eye color.
We have conquered all eyes.
But we haven't. Charles and I are both blue.
I think that we've conquered eyes regardless.
That's fair. Desiree has black eyes.
Ooh. I always wanted
Like
violet
a doll's
eyes.
Okay, let me hashtag this son of a bitch, and then we're on.
Hashtag it.
Yeah.
That's okay. Last week I cut off the intro by doing it as soon as we went live, and it was awful. Oh no, you don't. What else is Des? Can you turn off YouTube, please? It kills. And this is probably killing things too. No. And this is probably killing things.
Alright, I'm gonna tweet it out if you're ready.
Yeah, go ahead and tweet it out. We should be good now. Boop. Lovely. Oh my god, my phone's going crazy. Okay. What evil strikes in the hearts of men? No one knows, but we do. We're Wandering Monster. Roll initiative! This is followed by radical music, which I'm not going to make mouth noises for this time. Sorry. That intro was weird. Usually I have time to, like, sit and write the intros and think about what will be funny and what will sound good roared at people. Not so much when we're doing this thing live. My name is John Baltusberger.
I am Charles R. Bernard.
And I am Lemons Clemens.
And this, as you have no doubt guessed, purely from the audio quality, is Wandering Monster, the Monster Manual of Podcasts. I am John... Wait, nope, did that part already. We had... Guys, last week was fun.
It was.
It definitely was.
I listened to the audio. There were some issues, namely clinky clinks from me drinking
marble soda,
and some other noises from just kind of me being obnoxious. But I feel it's okay. And we had fun, and that's like the key point in doing this.
Yes.
We had fun, but we didn't have too much fun. Like, I don't know if you guys saw, but there was a writer for The New Yorker who recently was suspended because he was whacking it, and his Zoom call went live with, like, all these editors and New Yorker writers, and he was just, like, going to town, and, yeah, so, like, I mean, it wasn't intentional. He wasn't, like, Harvey Weinsteining it, but it still was, you know. And this is a guy who's, like, I forget his name, and I wouldn't want to repeat it anyway, because, you know, who among us, John?
Not me. Not right before a Zoom call.
Yeah, man. Look, I separate the time for breastises and booty-isses, and my business time are two separate times. Now, I have a friend who that is not the case for, and he's a lovely individual, but he's not me, is my point. There's
Right.
so much, guys. There's so much bullshit on my desk right now. Every time I try to put my hands down, I'm making noise. Here,
That's
this will...
super glue that I saw there? Or
No,
Yeah,
that's...
no, Neosporin.
Yes.
Oh.
Lemons
know
is
it well.
correct. It's Neosporin.
What did you do yourself?
There's so much. For those of you not in the know, this is kind of the writer's life. I have so many notes here on what I'm supposed to do with what characters. I am thinking about hiring someone to read some of my books and take character notes so I can remember who the fuck I put in what book.
That's the George R. Martin route, when you've got to have like an auxiliary brain to back your brain up. I feel that. That's respect, mad respect.
One time I was interviewing Jay Wilburn, and he said, "Yeah, occasionally I write a story, and then I realize I've already written that story." I was like, how much do you have to write to not remember if you wrote a thing at all or not? That's incredible. Props.
L. Ron Hubbard has to have repeated himself at some point or points.
every other book.
Yeah. I mean,
anyone who self-insert fanfics. I mean,
yeah,
they just.
I mean, okay, to be fair, I've written countless stories where the basic premise is Alucard sweeps me away in his big strong arms. Sometimes it's Spider-Man, but same basic premise. They're vampires in both of my stories.
What? Okay.
Fucking
I like your version of Spider-Man. Like a man who has Spider-Man's powers, but also must like attack
Consume
his
the
prey,
blood.
inject, like digestive juices. And
Yeah,
then, like,
no, for sure.
Nom, 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 nom.
Does whatever a spider can.
Mm.
Seems very obvious. Spider-Man has a weird mix-up of some really cool villains and some really dumb villains.
He has one of the better rogues galleries, I would agree.
But like better is subjective in this term, because sometimes you see a Spider-Man villain and you're like, fuck yeah, that's fucking cool. And sometimes you see a Spider-Man villain and you're like, so who slept in and had to like go to the pitch meeting underprepared for this one?
Stan Lee is the
Honestly, I don't think anything could beat the dude with a rhino head. Like, after you get just like a dude...
Alexei... He is trapped in a rhino, like, mechano-rhino mecha suit.
Sometimes he's just wearing a bad rhino costume. And that is where I draw the line. If you can't even get a decent villain costume, you do not deserve to be a villain, especially not for any superhero out there. Except for Superman, rather.
Who is to say, Lemons, who is to say who the good supervillains are, the worthwhile supervillains are? I'll tell you goddamn who we are, Wandering Monster. The theme for this week is, in fact, supervillains. Suggested by this guy, Charles R. Bernard, I believe.
No, it was me.
It was Lemons. It was that person down there, Lemons.
See, it goes to show you that it could have been either one of us, because I too am a lover of supervillains. Well, Lemons, do you want to start us out with a few words about what you love about supervillains?
I particularly like supervillains for their backstories, because I feel like supervillains are more down to earth. Like, superheroes, half the time it's just like, a comet landed and now I have superpowers, or like, I ingested this thing that you're really not supposed to ingest and now I have superpowers, which is stupid. That's dumb. A supervillain has like a 17-part backstory, you know what I mean? And like, if it's DC, then it changes every day.
Yep.
But anytime they bring that superhero up, the backstory is changing. But I guess Marvel does that too sometimes. But usually they're not as bad. But I just like that they oftentimes supervillains have like the saddest stories or the most interesting stories. Like, they're just like, my wife died and the cops did nothing, the people did nothing, they let her murderer go, and like, fuck this town, fuck it all. I guess I'm saying I self-identify as a supervillain.
It's funny you should say that, because I too and in my case, what I love is a supervillain who's motivated by the superhero that they're the arch and nemesis of. That like give and take relationship is one of my favorite things. Like the idea of the villain who's only in it to fuck with the superhero, I've always really appreciated. And in fact, I've flattered myself to think that if there were like real life superheroes, I would step up and be one of the few, the proud, the supervillain.
The boys.
Yeah.
I've been the reason I've been like wiggling over here is there's a red light right
It's your lens
here.
flare.
It's not, because I can cover that, and I can cover that red light, and
It's
like
It's the light behind you.
What is it?
It's your ceiling light.
Son of
Yeah.
a bitch.
He tricked you.
This
I
is
guess
where
I'll
I
just.
should say that if whoever is watching this out there has not watched Host on Shudder, I cannot recommend it strongly enough. It's like one of the first core horror movies, and it's essentially about a haunted Zoom call, and it's dope as shit. Like it's really a lot of fun.
Okay, two things. First, I do not identify with the supervillains.
Are you okay?
I don't identify with
wrong, that's
superheroes either.
Mm.
I think they're both kind of twatty. I tend to identify with anti-heroes more. Your Constantine, for instance, because I don't know if y'all know. Like, okay, Charles, with your perfect health, I know that you don't know this, and Lemons with fucking your life. But life can be hard sometimes. Life can be difficult, and so I really
I've heard rumors.
I've heard rumors. Never experienced it myself.
Yeah.
But I always identify with the characters that are like, okay, I need to make sure my shit's on lock, and then I can figure other things out. But when push comes to shove, they're always like, all right, well, I have to do the right thing because it's the right thing.
So would
That's
you say
true.
you're more? Oh Jesus, this is intense. Sorry, my visualizer got really wild.
is making my nipples hurt, to be frank.
I'm sorry. I just wanted it to be.
Thought that was a
interesting over
horny
there.
ghost that was haunting our Zoom call, just tweaking your people's plaything.
You mentioned that one guy masturbating, and we all got
We all got haunted, cursed.
extremely haunted and extremely cursed. I was going to say, I suppose you identify more as like an anti-hero or reluctant hero, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I'm not crazy about. So, I've had this talk before. I don't know if we've talked about it on Wandering Monster. We have talked about like my kind of dislike of abusive TV shows. Shows where like everyone's a dick to each other, everyone's mean to each other. It's one thing that I think, honestly, I blame like shows like Family Guy for, where it's just like constant negativity and no one's good, and I'm just I got exhausted by it. It's one reason I liked Reno 911. No, not Reno 911. That's exactly not Brooklyn 99.
Ah, yes.
'Cause
Okay. I was like, that's interesting.
Because everyone on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like every single person, except for like one or two supporting cast members that only showed up once in a blue moon, is trying to do their best and likes one another and supports one another, even when they're kind of being like pranky with each other. So
That's
like
cool.
it's hard for me. It's hard for me to get in on any kind of media where the premise is people are dicks to each other nonstop forever, which makes Avengers sometimes hard to watch.
Well, you could also go back and watch Batman 66 if you want a little taste of a world where, the supervillains are just like cackling dum-dums like the Riddler and, Cesar Romero's terrible Joker. And although Catwoman on that show is very good, but yeah. You know what? I'm the opposite. I can never have enough grimdark, and in fact, if a show is like at all optimistic, I'm out. Like as soon as I just get a whiff of optimism, I'm like, fuck this shit. In fact, I'm about to write a big long thing for Madness Heart about how I rewatched like all the shows in the Daredevil universe on Netflix.
Oh,
Sorry.
And like they are really like socially conservative.
yeah.
More so than people realize, and like I documented the different ways in which they're like Christian and very like, so I don't know, it's
Sounds fascinating. I will say this,
okay.
Charles. Oh, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I have to interrupt. I think Daredevil is by far, and you know my hatred of Superman. So when I say this, I want you to take it seriously. I think Daredevil is the worst superhero in the history of the planet.
possible.
He's a terrible lawyer. He's a defense lawyer, and half the time he just goes out and beats up the dude who's supposed to be on trial. and then walks back in like everything's fine. He's lied to literally everyone who's ever cared about him, and he's literally got no gadgets. His superpower is Catholic guilt. Like I hate it. I can't do it. I
I
cannot stand Daredevil.
Matt
I
Murdock is
just
definitely a complicated character, and his
is he
backstory with women in particular is like occasionally troubling.
the show at least because I haven't read many Daredevil comic. I remember one moment in the Daredevil or in a I read the Fear Itself the entire Fear Itself like catalog of comics, and there's a moment where they invited Daredevil to join the Avengers, and you shouldn't ask, is Daredevil Avengers material, but are the Avengers Daredevil? But it's like, should they ask that though? Should they ask like, oh, what's Daredevil's power? Oh, he can see. Yeah, so can everyone else. Yeah, but he's blind and can see. Okay, and he has no fear. Oh, okay. I'll take Wolverine though, actually, because
Good.
he also can't die. But I was gonna say it's interesting you said that, Charles, because okay, Charles and I often enjoy the same things. Just as often, we have opposite views on things. Case in point, I did not enjoy Underwater at all.
Yeah, and I really liked it, but I was a big
Partially because I wanted them to stop winning. I didn't like any of the stuff that went right for them.
I thought that you were like into optimistic escapism and people being nice to one another and everything.
I like that they're nice to each other, but don't I don't
They were pretty
but
nice
but
to
the
each other.
monsters don't need to be nice to each other.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, look, we're off track. We're off track. Obviously, the greatest supervillain of all time is Godzilla, and I'm here to talk to you about Kaiju. No, that's not true.
Yet
Um,
again, volume 2.
Volume 2. Fuck you, it's Kaiju time, motherfucker. No. All day, every day. I'm really fascinated to hear what you guys have to say because Lemons Lemons is they're super opinionated about superhero stuff, and like you have a really unique view on like culture and the way supervillains and superheroes kind of evolve, and how many times that kind of empowers and backs up the status quo and white people's power fantasies. And Charles, you're fucking just super into supervillains,
I am.
and I think I know who you brought based on your opening salvo of the best supervillains to find to buy their superheroes.
In that case you're completely wrong.
Hooray! On
Okay.
that point, Charles, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me what I've won.
Okay. So, roundabout and some odd, there was a very strange development in the world of comic books. What happened was like what I can only describe as sort of a rightward drift of certain titles and labels. And what you wound up with was like an extremely complicated political scene for comic books, kind of like the 80s were. And one of the prime purveyors of that bullshit was Frank Miller, whose old work on Batman is like defined the character, and who wrote 300 and who wrote Sin City, and who like he's a serious player in the comic book world. But he also, around about the time of Occupy, came out as like very right wing, which if you read his comic books, kind of was there from the beginning. But
Yeah,
whatever.
no, he loves blood, bruises, and bullets.
Bingo. And I kind of thought it was like ironic until he was like, no, I really like anyway. That's not who I'm here to talk about. There
Thank
was
God.
sort of a lesser known figure who is pretty prominent in comic books, named Mark Millar, Millar. Now he's worked on like all kinds of titles, and I'm not entirely sure what his politics are personally. Like I haven't bothered to hunt it down explicitly because I frankly am afraid of what I would find. But in 2003, he penned a series for Top Cow Comics that was called Wanted. Now, Wanted was later made into a fucking atrocious 2008 adaptation starring Angelina Jolie that
Yeah,
had
that was bad.
almost literally nothing to do with the comic book, like almost literally nothing to do with it. It was one of the weirdest, like, quote unquote adaptations in history. Now, the reason for that in part is because the source material is like, well, see, I would have originally said it was deeply unfilmable, but now we live in the age of like The Boys and Watchmen and like intelligent comic book series. But even with that, I don't think that you'll ever see a real adaptation of Wanted, maybe an
Mm.
animated one, because the politics are like, I can only describe them as alt-right. The protagonist is a basically like an amoral nihilist white boy who looks just like Eminem. He's picked on at work by his boss. He's like beat up by the quote unquote cholos on his way home. He's, just like the modern man who's been a man, blah 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 blah, blah, all this men's rights bullshit, right? And he comes to find out that actually he's the heir of a supervillain whose superpower is just that he's really good at killing people, and that's the same superpower that this kid Wesley has. Is just like he's very good at murdering people.
You really only need that. Like that's the main one if you're going to be a villain.
Well, yeah,
Mm.
that's like there's a whole bit about that where he's like, here are some like I'll get there. Okay,
Okay,
there
okay,
could be
sorry.
big spoilers coming, so
Ooh.
brace yourself for that. So, what's really interesting about the comic book is that it imagines a world where there is a global conspiracy controlling our lives and keeping us miserable. And that global conspiracy is a conspiracy of supervillains who are real, even though they're portrayed as fictional in comic books and on TV and everything. And the real deal with supervillains is that one day, like about, I think in the comic book, it's like 15, 20 years ago. It's never like really closely defined, but they finally got smart and teamed up. So like all the supervillains finally teamed up, and it was the work of like a day to take out all the superheroes. And then what they basically did was divide up the world, divide up the planet into different regions, and like a supervillain got a region and would get to run it, and there are all these different supervillains, and it's basically a world of nothing but supervillains with no superheroes. And the supervillains are antsy because they've been running shit like the mafia behind the scenes. They don't get to like dress up and go out and like do their thing anymore and terrorize people. So there's a coup within the villain conspiracy led by the guy that I brought for tonight, a little fellow named Mr. Rictus. Now, Mr. Rictus has decided that he's had enough of running the world from behind the scenes, and that he and his faction are going to instead murder the supervillains who are running the world and then go public and just like burn everything to the fucking ground. And
Okay.
and Mr. Rictus, you're like, well, what would motivate a guy like that? So Mr. Rictus is a human-shaped monster. He has no real definable superpowers except that he's extremely intelligent and absolutely ruthless. He is called Mr. Rictus because he used to be a preacher, a fundamentalist preacher, who suffered a horrible accident that burned his face off completely. So it's just like this, god awful, like skull like mask of a Rictus, a big grin. And he had a near death experience. He died on the operating table during the accident, realized there was no God, and that he devoted his entire life to being a fundamentalist preacher, and that there's no afterlife. And so he came back as like a Joker style, like purely nihilistic, like I will torture you to death in front of your children for laughs type of guy. And there's an amazing scene where he is announcing that he's performed this coup to the other like king villains basically. And as part of his announcement, he is sitting down at a table with the carcass of the supervillain, the super scientist he just killed, that has been like fully like roasted like a fucking turkey,
Oh
and
my
they're
God.
like dining on his adversary, like, oh, so good, I killed him and ate him, and now I'm coming for you. And then like, yeah, his faction takes out the other king villains, and he runs amok. And it turns out that our little blonde angry white boy super protagonist does realize that in fact killing is the best superpower. And so there is a pretty amazing monologue where he says, like, here are all these villains, super geniuses and like things that can move through time and like invade people's minds and give them psychic viruses and shit. And here I am just taking them out, pop pop pop, with a sniper rifle, because my only superpower is ending life, my only superpower is stopping you from breathing. And like, it is kind of an intimidating little diatribe that he gives. And spoilies again, but Wesley does successfully kill like all the coup people and blah blah blah. The twist ending isn't important, and the movie adaptation certainly isn't important. And the book's politics are terrible, but when it comes to supervillains, some of whom are spoofs of like existing supervillains, and some of whom are just like original creations, it's such an interesting grab bag of like goofy and terrifying, of like silly and sadistic and like self-satirizing. So although I detest its politics and the ending is one of the worst ones in comic book history,
Well,
overall the experience is like the anti-Watchmen. It's like the opposite of Watchmen, kind of. So for that reason, I would say Wanted, 2003's Wanted, which is available in several collected editions from Top Cow, is definitely worth checking out. And Mr. Rictus is one hell of a memorable villain. Scarred up, bloodthirsty cannibal. You know how I feel about those kind of people.
I do.
Honest. Yeah,
So,
love
I want to let you know, I did get up and I did run away as soon as you started talking. It's not because of you. It's because whenever I tell my daughter, like, hey, I'm recording tonight, she loses her goddamn mind. And today's experience was falling between her bed and the wall and getting trapped.
oh,
However,
So, like,
remember, she has a loft bed, so she is trapped between the bed and the wall, 7 feet in the air.
oh, Bunny.
So what I'm getting from this is that, like, with her, needing attention while you're on the computer, with her getting trapped between the bed and the wall, like having a child is a lot like having a cat. It sounds like.
It's a lot like having a cat if your cat also had to be on Zoom calls with her teacher 4 times a day. And you had to like make sure your cat was doing certain things at certain times, and you couldn't just like leave a bowl of kibble out for your cat. You had to like cook
Well,
the
I mean,
meals
you could leave a
several
bowl of
times.
kibble out for
Not if
Aziza.
I want to fucking keep her in my life, and I do. I love that little wigwam.
Maybe she likes kibble.
She certainly does not. Look,
Okay.
there's a bowl of kibble sitting on the floor for another member of my family,
I see.
and Aziza never eats it. She has access to all the kibble she wants, and never, not since she was little, has she gone for it. I don't
I
think.
think when I was a kid, I had to try a dog biscuit a couple times. I don't think I ever.
Well,
ate
dog
any
biscuits
kibble.
are just delicious.
They're kind
Wrong.
of like
Everyone's
just
wrong
like
here.
a low
It's a-
quality cracker.
They are exactly like low quality crackers, much like myself.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, a couple of low quality crackers. Two.
Um,
Good lord.
second. So I've actually always been interested in reading Wanted. I've always I watched the movie, and I thought, okay, I watched that, and then I saw it was a comic book, and I was like, okay, maybe this is something I will check out eventually. And
Absolutely nothing to do with the movie. Like I can think of maybe 3 plot points that they took from the comic book. Literally, it's
I'm guessing side boob, Russian character, and
The bats. I
mirror
bet the bats
gun.
are in there. Ooh, mirror gun. That's not bad.
Those are my 3 guesses. There was a Wanted video game too.
yeah. Miragun is definitely in there though, where he curves the bullet around somebody. However, most of the rest of it, the side boob. I'm trying to remember.
There
Like, he
mu-
does have Actually, his girlfriend in the comic book is black.
Oh, black people can have side boob too, right, Charles?
Well, right. I'm
Okay.
realizing that they like race switched into Angelina Jolie, and that's very strange.
It's not okay. It's not that strange because it's Hollywood, and they'll do that for no reason.
Well,
Uh,
yeah, I mean it's
and second
as
reason,
strange
like
as they
star
usually are.
power, Angelina Jolie had a lot of star power at that point.
They also
Um,
chose James McAvoy, so I think that we're not really discussing anything that
Anything
was
worthwhile.
intended for accuracy. Oh, I mean, yeah, no, I can't actually point to anything that he's done that I think is worthwhile. I am curious, though. I am curious because I have something in mind. What would you guys say? I'm so sorry. I know that this is probably dragging on, but what would you guys say is your favorite like comic adaptation?
Adaptation.
Ah,
Like of the source material or based on source material?
either one.
I don't understand the distinction, but that's okay.
Oh, I can
Um,
tell you the distinction. So Zack Snyder's Watchmen movie was a very faithful adaptation of the comic book source material,
mm-hmm.
despite Alan Moore bitching. It was pretty faithful.
Yeah.
The series on HBO is based on the Watchmen
Okay, I
universe.
got adaptation or something based on. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Okay. Hmm. I almost want to say Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
That's a good one.
I read all the comics pretty quickly, and there's some there, and then I went and saw the movie with a bunch of people that had also read the comics, and were all like, "Man, I'm just ready to be disappointed," and I wasn't. Like, it was awesome in the ways I wanted it to be awesome. It was awkward in the ways I wanted to be awkward, and it was really problematic in the ways that were true to the source material.
And it was comic booky AF, which
It
I
was
enjoyed.
comic booky AF. But hey, that thing I said about Spider-Man like carrying me in his big strong arm, not a joke.
Mm.
I think I've decided. I think my favorite adaptation is the Sam Keith the Max cartoon from the 90s that was on Liquid Television on MTV.
Pretty good.
Like, not only is it very true to the comic book, but it's just like I think sets the standard for like good animated adaptations.
Okay.
Whereas the Killing Joke, that recent one that just came out, the adaptation of the Alan Moore comic, that's
Yeah.
how you fuck up an adaptation. That's how you ruin
Yeah. Yeah, that was super disappointing.
it. It was.
I don't know anything about it.
The you can
And I'm
you,
grateful.
you can yeah, I was gonna say you should feel good with that decision.
Yeah.
Thank you. My favorite, and I do really enjoy the Watchmen series, but my favorite is in fact called The Losers.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I think it was really well. It was a very watchable version of what the comic book had.
Yeah.
Which I've read the two. I think there's two. There might be three anthologies of that. But it was fun. It was campy. It was everything that a comic book should be, and they didn't lean into the racism at inappropriate moments, which I was really expecting. Um, and also it was Chris Evans in his like superhero after superhero mode. I think it was right before like he started doing Fantastic Four and all that shit. Like
Hmm.
he looks so goofy. He looks so goofy in that movie. But it is perfect for his character. Everyone in that movie is like absolutely really well cast. Even Zoe Saldana, who I hate. Um, so I highly recommend that. I also really highly recommend the comic books. They're very enjoyable. Also, it's one of the few comic books where like nobody has superpowers and the real villains are human beings, which like yes,
Yeah.
but it's not like depressing.
So, on that note, I think you should go ahead and tell us about your supervillain, Lemons.
Sure.
I'm very curious about what you brought to the table tonight.
I thought about going like legendary histories of blah blah blah, but then I remembered something that really inspired my love of very smart supervillains, and that is James Moriarty.
Ah.
I normally would not speak of Arthur Conan Doyle ever. He and
Yet this
Sherlock
is the
Holmes.
second time you've done so on this show.
I understand, but he and Sherlock Holmes can eat my dick. But I really like Moriarty as a character, but I specifically like Moriarty out of the hands of Arthur Conan Doyle. For those of you that don't know, Moriarty only appears in one single short story starring Sherlock Holmes. And they both die at the end, which is great. That's the perfect ending for it. But he's described essentially as this perfectly normal man who is very studious, and he is supposedly a professor, but everything's very mysterious about him, and he just wants to take Holmes down. And I love that he is so normal in that, and that people have taken this extremely normal guy and blown him up into incredible proportions. And sometimes he's not even a he. The first time I was introduced to Moriarty, and this is gonna sound like the worst thing ever, was Sherlock Holmes in the 22nd Century, which is, in my opinion,
is that a movie? A comedy?
Oh, it's a television show. It's it's a cartoon from the 90s.
That is great.
Sherlock Holmes is cryogenically frozen or some shit, and they find him in the sewers in 2323 or whatever. And listen, I will not say that this is a good show, but I really enjoyed it. I couldn't tell you anything that happens, but Moriarty obviously has to show up. I think it's Moriarty's great-great-grandson or something really strange.
It's not like a Batman Beyond situation.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Batman
But
Beyond's so good.
it's just so silly. Oh man, Batman Beyond, God bless. That is a good Batman.
It very much is, yeah, I agree.
Anyway, so I love that this incredibly normal dude, number one, the only way that Sherlock Holmes can beat him is just by throwing them both off a fucking waterfall or whatever. And just going down the cliff together. I love that the whole point, again, which is something that you brought up, is that he was truly a villain that was created to counterpoint the hero.
Yeah.
Unquote.
As an antithesis to the thesis.
Exactly. But Moriarty is interesting to me because there are so many times, most of the time, Moriarty shows up in conjunction with Sherlock Holmes. And Sherlock Holmes is always wearing that stupid hunting costume, which is dumb. But Moriarty is a character who I feel has changed immensely over the years, and the ways in which the people use Moriarty is fascinating. For example, in Star Trek, we'll start there. A version of Moriarty essentially escapes the holodeck, and the whole point is that Data is masquerading as Sherlock Holmes, as he does. And Moriarty realizes that he's a holographic being, and he is I want out. I'm getting out. I am leaving this place. And he
Holy
totally
shit.
fucks up the Enterprise.
Rad.
And yeah, no, it's just super rad. He kidnaps the racist nurse, and she's a doctor, my bad, Pulaski, and lets her go, and it's just this whole cat and mouse game with Data, and Data the whole time is trying to be Sherlock Holmes, and it's not until Data's I'm just gonna be Data.
That's amazing.
I'm just gonna be Data.
That sounds so
that
good.
he actually beats him.
So an idea for a future episode, just before I forget, we should do Escape from the Holodeck, because enough
Yes.
things have Escape from the Holodeck that I think we could do, one where we each just pick our favorite.
Dibs on Voyager. Anyway, I just had to call it. I had to call it.
I will do as y'all tell me to do. I got my first enjoyable Moriarty from the Cucumber Pumpkin Patch. version of Sherlock, in which the first instance
the crown
of him
jewels or whatever.
is, well, the very first time you meet him is the girl who's obsessed with Sherlock saying, "This is my boyfriend," and Sherlock being like, "Nope, that guy's gay," and then it
Yeah.
turns out to be Moriarty.
Yeah.
And I think I really like soft-spoken kind of villains like that. So he really struck a chord as being like, I thought he was very fun.
I love a villain with
My-
an umbrella too, so that was, a
Oh,
double.
yeah. My favorite adaptation of Moriarty is actually in Elementary, which I personally think is the best version of Sherlock and Watson on the planet. You will have to work very hard to convince me otherwise. Elementary is everything that a modern adaptation should be, because Sherlock is a human, number one, and not just like a soulless robot. No offense to Data. But
Hurt.
words do hurt. I love you, Data. I'm so sorry.
They don't hurt him.
Father.
He has no emotions.
He does get emotions.
Eventually, but not in this particular space and time. Motherfucker
enough.
hasn't even been built yet.
All right, look, we can have the Pinocchio discussion another night.
Point being.
Toothpicks.
I oh boy. Point being, I really like the way that they did that. I feel bad spoiling this because I think it's a show that's worth watching, but
Well, don't spoil it then. Just tell everyone they should go watch it.
I think you should go watch it. I think what they do with Moriarty, Moriarty's like criminal empire is really interesting. How it intersects with like Sherlock's life is really quite fascinating. I also think it's one of the few adaptations of Sherlock Holmes where they like discuss his drug use. And that he's an addict, which he is, like, written into the stories. He's fucking high as fuck half the time.
Yeah, he's an opium addict, isn't he?
Yes.
Like
I thought it was cocaine.
No. He tries to like dream and kill his brain between cases because he's
Yeah.
so bored by the average man.
Yeah.
Prick.
But I think it's one of I think it's one of the few. The way that they do it in Elementary is very good. It's not just like I'm bored. Again, he's like a human being, so he has human feelings, and like the way that he falls into addiction is very intense, and the way that he like comes up against his former dealer, for example, is like it's very loaded. And Watson actually starts out as his like sober companion, so she's living with him because she's a former doctor living with him because she's like trying to help him stay sober.
Yeah.
Which is like it's just such a great way to introduce the two of them, and they're best friends who live together and like love each other, and there's not a single ounce of romance between them. It's just like we love each other and we support each other, even though you're a fucking strange ass man and I'm a strange ass woman, and like there's no reason this relationship should work except it does. So that's my vote for Elementary.
Yeah, I like that. Odd shaped relationships can be, some of the only compelling ones to watch, in my opinion. So that sounds great. The archetype of the Sherlock Moriarty relationship has been repeated so many times. Like there's even echoes of it in Batman and the Joker.
Yeah.
Like, almost any time that you have somebody with like an arch nemesis, there's like shades of Sherlock and Moriarty, which is interesting because, as you point out, he was really only in like one story, and his shadow does loom very large. Like, Hannibal and Will Graham on the show Hannibal is an example of like a Sherlock Moriarty relationship. And yeah, I can think of a bunch of them. They're some of my favorites to watch. Two intelligent adversaries going at it.
That's part of why I wanted to bring him, because I feel like there's a lot of influence that this had over modern stories. And like there's obviously like people have done it before. This is not the first time that a smart person has been bested by another smart person. But I really do feel like there's, especially when there's like a detective versus like a murderer kind of situation, there's always that element. For example, Luther, I feel like has a really good Moriarty type character in it. Not that Luther's great. The show is, I'm sorry, the show is very good. The actual character of Luther is a piece of shit. Which is great. It works really well for the show. But I like the idea of an adversary that you cannot outthink, you cannot outmaneuver, you cannot outrich them. Like, there's nothing that you can do except just like sacrifice yourself in order to get there. Which happens a lot, especially in comic books. Like, superheroes die often in pursuit of like trying to do something, trying to protect the world, essentially.
Yeah, I am going to cut us there because we're about to get into spoilies for something John has worked on. Instead, let's take a look at my favorite supervillains, the other podcast on the Project Entertainment Network.
Smooth as silk. Smooth as silk.
Now look, if you're watching this live or you're checking out the video on our Patreon, we're not actually cutting to ads right now. That's just for the podcast that you'll hear that. So, if you're not a member of our Patreon, you're seeing this on YouTube or you're live, join our Patreon and we will be able to get Charles a massive skull-shaped hookah that he can just light and fucking curl up into a caterpillar husk there and smoke on his hookah during these live things, and I would just fucking love to watch that.
Aww.
I had a hookah for many years.
I don't think I owned one, but I had a friend who had a hookah. Yeah, I could tell stories, but probably not on the
live feed.
Yeah.
I will say something, and we might want to play with Skype next time because something is eating the bandwidth, and I have no idea what that could be.
Probably Zoom.
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe next time we try Skype and see if that works better.
Okie doke.
But we have time. If you're not hearing this because Skype or Zoom has fucked us all, that's okay because we have the cursed episode, I believe, in the chamber, just waiting to go live. So we'll see what happens. Whenever we change formats, there's a lot of experimenting going on, and we'll get there. On that note, welcome back, everyone, from that wonderful break. If you're listening to us on a podcast, you missed me telling Lemon's darkest and deepest secrets, which mostly involve tapioca. But we're back now, and you've missed those. You'll never get to hear those now. I guess that leaves us with me. I get to talk about villainy now.
Little old John Baltusberger?
Now, okay. As a dude who loves video games and fantasy and horror and like comic books, like there's a lot of villains I like a lot.
Yep.
I thought about bringing a bunch of full disclosure, I started playing World of Warcraft again.
Oh, that's right. You did threaten to do that.
You're in a safe space. You can come forward with these.
I can do it. I can, like, this still matters. It's still real to me. But so I thought about Garrosh, which is Orcish Hitler, or Gul'dan, who is Orcish Stalin, kind of. Or like Arthas, or any number of like horrible dictator tyrants who were. I mean, the whole point of Warcraft is it's like various factions which are tied to races fighting. So like everyone's pretty racist actually. But I decided that wasn't actually, like, talking about racism's not super fun. And we do it a lot on this show.
It is one of our many pursuits.
I thought about Doc Ock. Especially like the female version of Doctor Octopus.
She's so good.
She's so fucking cool.
Or
And
what was the one where Doc Ock took over as Spider-Man for a while?
I am not a big fan of the Superior Spider-Man.
That's the one, Superior Spider-Man.
Part of the reason I'm not very a big fan of that is because every other panel it was like, and I will now be a Superior Spider-Man. I am now a superior. Like, you don't do.
Well, he is Dr. Octopus, you know.
No. Everyone did it. Venom did it. Carnage did it. And, like, Spider-Man. Now I'm in a superior coma. No, fuck off. God. Okay, look. I love comic books. I expect a certain level of hackneyed writing once in a while. I get it. But there's a fucking line. That line is every other panel being, I'm the superior Spider-Man now. Although there is a great moment in that comic where Spider-Man goes to fight a villain, and like Doc Octopus is like, alright, well, Spider-Man always beats us up, so it can't be that hard. And he punches the guy's jaw off.
Oh, Jesus
And and Dr. Octopus like does this and goes, oh, Peter Parker was pulling his punches because if he wanted to, he could murder every single one of us without breaking a sweat.
Of course, just like Superman. Like,
yeah,
like
those
guys like tissue paper.
Yeah, like Spider-Man is not as strong as Superman or the Martian Manhunter.
No, but if you could lift a car, you could fuck a guy up.
Yeah, like, and a car is the least thing. Like, he could pick up a bus.
Yeah.
So, like, anyway, okay.
And John Austin Baltzberger.
He could probably pick me up. I don't know. I got a few extra daddy pounds here.
I think
he's got you covered.
It's because of the macaroni and cheese. I add red curry to it, so it's extra tasty. So I thought about all these different guys. I thought about all these different heroes and villains and anti-heroes. I've been watching Hellstrom, not because it's good, but just because it is.
I've been meaning to check that out.
It's okay. I think what you will like about it, Charles, is that even though there's a heavy dose of Catholicism in it, Damien Hellstrom doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, I kind of have to read it for my beat just to see what the haps are.
Yeah,
so
we'll see how you review it.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, guys, I am our RPG correspondent.
True.
I'm the man who dives deep behind the scenes of, let's be honest, Kickstarter, and finds those little hidden gems that I will waste my money on, knowing full well that the likelihood that I'll ever get to run a game ever again is about as likely as Aziza giving me a good night's rest. But a while back, I picked up a book on Kickstarter. A very pretty book. Now, this book is called, what is it called?
Against the Dark Yogi?
Against the Dark Yogi. This book is set in Eastern mythology, and by Eastern I mean Indian, as opposed to like Japanese or anything. It was written by a guy named Thorin Tabor, who I pray to God is a dwarf, not as in a little person, but as a, like Lord of the Rings dwarf.
No, his name is Thorin. I mean,
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
The book really plays on Eastern mythology, and the basic premise of this whole world is that at the end of their lives, the like Bodhisattva is supposed to like release that like good karma back into the universe and like reincarnate or go to nirvana, one of those things, right? The basic premise is that one didn't, and basically left this karmic imbalance in the world of like heavy on the side negativity, and then
disturbance in the force.
Absorbed that, it became this like dark, twisted version of what a powerful Bodhisattva is supposed to be. Essentially, he followed the left-hand path.
Yep.
He followed a left-hand path of like, well, what if instead of like sacrificing my being for the greater cosmic balance and the good of everyone, I instead like looked out for myself and
Individuation, yeah,
did my own
absolutely.
thing.
Your left-hand path principle.
Yeah, and look, either path taken to the extreme, not actually a good thing. I'm not. I am more of a right-hand path person overall, but I'm not going to give up everything I have and eat twigs that have already fallen off the trees. I enjoy meat and dairy way too much. Oh, and also, harvesting honey helps bees. You are murdering the bees and murdering our planet by doing agave instead of honey. Fucking knock it off. Against the Dark Yogi is cool because it doesn't play into those Western stereotypes and tropes of a game. It plays very heavily on like what feudal, I'm not sure the right term here, Indian culture had been during older times. Unfortunately, there is a caste system. Not my favorite thing, but it's true to the setting, right? It mentions like, hey, if you're a badass warrior in this game, you are an archer and also a poet. Like, fighting with swords was kind of a punk's game. And so there's all these different things, all these different rules, and it's a really beautiful game. I think Tab Creations did a really good job. I just want to show you all the inside.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's really, really pretty. It's really high quality, which sometimes when you pre-order a game or you buy a game from Kickstarter, you get like a softbound book. But
Who's the publisher?
the publisher is Tab Creations. Right there, I'll show you the logo. Really pretty logo too. And what I like about this villain is, unlike the ones we've already talked about, Moriarty is just super smart.
Mr. Rictus
Is kind of insane. He's like, you called him Joker-esque.
Yeah.
Neither of them are what I would consider to be like villains who you can root for, other than like just wanting to root for a villain. Like, there's plenty of villains out there where you're like, oh, you know what, they're the villain, but like it's because they've been driven to this and they're trying to do a good thing. Like Killmonger from Black Panther.
That's like almost the standard villain model at this point.
It is kind of the standard villain model because they're trying to make villains human.
Relatable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because like no one gives a shit look, we've all watched Batman punch the Joker in the solar plexus so many times.
I could never watch it enough.
We've all seen the Joker shoot Alfred with a shotgun. We've all seen Alfred headbutt Superman. One of my favorite panels in all of comic books, by the way.
We have not all seen that. I have not seen that.
Okay, so
anytime you see Superman getting his ass kicked,
yeah.
So
it happens more than
my
you
way.
think. Yeah, it happens more than you think.
So what happened, Lemons, is there was some multiverse switch up in the Injustice storyline, and in order to fight Superman and his like super fascists, which is what they were, they developed these like Kryptonian super male vitality pills.
It's like temporary superpowers. Or
yeah,
whatever.
they essentially turn you into a temporary Kryptonian.
Okay.
And Superman comes to Alfred and was like, "Hey, you need to give up Superman, or you need to give up Batman. You need to give up all these people because I'm trying to protect the world." And Alfred's like, "Huh." And then just headbutts Superman into the next room. And it's great. Superman also murders a 5-year-old boy in that comic strip. Anyway, not
I think
5,
we've
he's
proven
10.
that Alfred is the only hero. I'm so sorry, I have to go on another sidebar. Can we talk about how anytime the fucking like Justice League becomes bad, Batman is the one. Batman is the one who is like, I don't think this is a good idea.
Not
I'm
always.
Gonna use my death files most of the time, though.
There was a time in Flashpoint where Batman became like a Darkseid's right hand man, and the Owl Man from like the reverse Justice League was definitely evil. Back when Wonder Woman was just like tooling around with every other hero. That was a weird one. That's a weird comic strip.
Even Owlman was like going against the grain of the.
That's just because he wanted Wonder Woman's
collection.
sweet thing.
I don't think so. I
Who
think it's because he
doesn't?
wanted to
But
blow
also-
up
That's
the
fair.
multiverse. But no, I think that the reason for that is because Batman. It's twofold. As our resident Batmanologist, allow me to answer this one. First of all, Batman is probably the hero who, more than any other one, doesn't play well with others.
Yeah.
Like, they make a point of that constantly in the comic books, that he's just like a fucking asshole to everybody and a dick all the time.
The yellow suit.
Yeah, and the second point is the one that's often cited, which is the fact that Batman has no superpowers is actually an advantage, because all these superpowered people like learn to lean on their ability. You know, if you're fast, you just learn to do stuff like super fast and don't worry about being strong. Whereas if you're very strong, you get it. So Batman has to constantly like outthink, outplan, outfox, outtrap, etc. his adversary. And so I think that he's more likely to like, take down the superhero cabal than another hero might be, because he's constantly figuring out ways to do it anyway. It's just a matter of like instituting plan B or whatever.
I agree that Batman is more likely to have files on how to take everyone down.
Mm-hmm.
I even agree that certainly he does not play with others as Bruce Wayne or as Batman. But the thing is, Batman's a cop, and
Yeah,
he likes
basically,
killing people.
Yeah,
Like
true.
I just don't. It just doesn't make sense to me. I'm like it makes more sense to me if you were like Hawkwoman is like, I don't think I want.
Okay, but isn't Hawkwoman
like,
also a cop? Or is that just the animated series?
that's the animated series.
Okay.
It also depends. Like
She's
in like the
alien
comic
cop.
books, in the actual comic books, she's an Egyptian woman who fell in love with the wrong fucking dude.
I've never heard that story before.
Oh.
I certainly didn't hear it last week when we were talking about kaiju.
No. Yeah, so like which is like, she's in an entirely different, there's aliens involved in that as well, because we can't allow the Egyptians to have anything. But
Yeah, they're like Thanos.
Okay, hold on. Sidebar.
Yes.